7 worst scenes in all Batman films that should have been deleted or quietly buried in Gotham Harbor before it destroyed the entire movie. Let's get to it. Number 1, the Shark Repellent. If you've ever seen Batman from 1966, then you already know this scene. And if you haven't, buckle your mental seatbelt because this is peak chaos. Batman is dangling from a rope ladder beneath a helicopter, 50 feet above the open ocean. His cape is catching the wind, the water is churning below him. It's dramatic. And then, out of absolutely nowhere, a shark launches out of the ocean and sinks its teeth into his leg. A normal person would panic. They would kick, scream, and maybe reconsider their life choices. Not this hero. Batman just hangs there, completely calm, reaches into his utility belt with his free hand, and pulls out a spray can. And printed right there on the label, in clean official text, it reads, Bat Shark Repellent Bat Spray. I'm not exaggerating. This is the actual name. He sprays the shark immediately lets go and drops back into the ocean, as if it just remembered an appointment. Then, Batman casually resumes climbing. Nobody reacts like anything insane just happened. The whole sequence lasts about 30 seconds, and it plays out with the full confidence of something that was always meant to be exactly this ridiculous. And here's the part people forget. It was intentional. The 1966 Batman franchise was built on one central joke. Batman has a gadget for everything. The show wore its absurdity proudly, so when the prop team built and labeled that spray can, they were doing their job perfectly. Nobody thought it was weird. They thought it was funny, and honestly, they were right. But what nobody could have predicted was what those 30 seconds of pure comedy would eventually turn into. We're getting there. Behind that cheerful, breezy clip was a small disaster happening off camera. During production, the rubber shark prop kept breaking. It was supposed to clamp gently onto Batman's leg and release on cue, but it did neither. Between takes, it locked up and bit down harder than it was designed to, and Adam West, the actor inside the Batman costume, ended up bleeding more than once. They had to stop and reshoot the sequence multiple times, not because of a bad performance, not because of lighting issues, but because a malfunctioning rubber fish kept injuring the star of the film. West later described it as one of the genuinely unpleasant days on the franchise. So that 30 seconds of pure fun on screen actually cost an entire day and some of the lead actors' blood to pull off. And then the internet got involved. That image, Batman dangling above the ocean, calmly spraying a shark with a clearly labeled can, became one of the most reposted images in internet history. It shows up in government efficiency memes, emergency kit jokes, and over-preparation posts. There's even a Reddit thread where someone posted a fully stocked survival bag, and the top comment, sitting at 40,000 upvotes, is just the Bat Shark Repellent can. No caption, no explanation, just the image of the can. The 1966 film knew exactly what it was and leaned into it completely. But then, Tim Burton's 1989 reboot was made to make the Batman movie dark, serious, and gothic. So how does that version of Batman end up with a scene so tonally out of place that Burton himself said it permanently damaged his love for the musician, whose music was forced into it? Number 2. Joker's Party Man. The scene in question is the 1989 Batman movie, Joker's invasion of the Gotham City Art Museum. The Joker, played by Jack Nicholson, and his crew vandalize priceless paintings, while Prince's Party Man blasts at full volume from a boombox. It does not last 10 seconds, it runs for minutes, long enough for you to feel the exact moment the film's dark, gothic atmosphere simply collapses. Critics noticed it immediately. Janet Maslin of the New York Times called the film curiously uneven around this section. Letterboxd reviewers, to this day, describe it as the Prince part, like it's a completely separate film, embedded inside a better one. The comment sections on YouTube clips of the scene are filled with people saying the same thing. The scene doesn't just fit. Burton himself did not exactly hide his feeling. In an interview with Rolling Stone, he admitted he hated every second of it. The irony is brutal. He had just attended 2 Prince concerts in London and described them as some of the best shows he had ever seen. Then the studio turned part of his film into what feels like a music video for that same artist, with little room for debate. The reason for this was because Prince was signed to Warner Brothers Records, which is owned by the same parent company as Warner Bros. Pictures. The studio locked in the soundtrack deal before the film was even finished, and the contract required that Prince's music be visibly featured on screen, not just released on the album. That museum scene was built specifically to fulfill that obligation, so Burton did not have creative control over it. Honestly, that is one of the most frustrating instances I have heard about a studio overwriting a director. The man liked the music, so they simply used that against him. Number 3. The Happy Meal That Bit Back. This scene is straight out of Batman Returns in 1992, and this time it's not about loud music. It's about something way worse. It's unexpectedly violent, and we'll find out how it basically detonated a corporate partnership worth millions of dollars. In the scene, the penguin just leans forward mid sentence and bites a man's nose clean off. The camera doesn't cut away, it holds on the blood running down the man's face. And remember, this is a PG-13 Batman movie. The same Batman movie that had a McDonald's Happy Meal campaign running in restaurants all across America. So, how did a graphic nosebite end up inside a kids' franchise film? And how did nobody catch it before it was too late? The moment happens roughly halfway through the movie. The penguin, played by Danny DeVito, has been working with a Gotham businessman named Max Schreck, played by Christopher Walken, to position himself for a mayoral run in Gotham City. In this particular meeting, the deal between them starts to unravel. Max begins to pull back, and the penguin realizes he's being used. But instead of threatening him with words or even a weapon, the penguin just lunges forward and bites him, right on the nose. When the film opened, the audience reaction was immediate. Parents in the theaters went quiet. Kids who showed up expecting a fun Batman adventure got a full close-up nose crunch instead. The scene itself was only half the disaster. The other half was already sitting in a cardboard box on a McDonald's counter. McDonald's had signed a full promotional deal with Warner Brothers before the film was released. Happy Meal toys modeled after the characters were already in production. Bags were printed, boxes were designed, and the penguin was smiling in plastic form next to a cheeseburger. But when parent groups started sending formal complaints specifically naming the nosebite scene, McDonald's had to pull the Happy Meal campaign while the film was still in theaters. The partnership between McDonald's and Warner Brothers ended completely, and McDonald's stayed away from superhero promotional deals at that scale for years afterward. Number 4. The ridiculous Bat-nipples. Warner Brothers' reaction to the McDonald's disaster was bringing in Joel Schumacher with one clear assignment: make Batman safe, commercial, and something that could never land them in this kind of mess again. Schumacher delivered exactly that. But he also built anatomical nipples into the Batsuit and later had to apologize for them publicly. Twice. Was that design choice that bad? And why did no one in that production team try to stop it before it became permanently attached to Batman history? From the very first scene, when the new Batsuit appeared on screen, the conversation around the film shifted permanently. Anatomical nipples sculpted directly into the rubber chest piece. The internet has kept this alive for 30 years. The Bat-nipples come up in film essays, YouTube retrospectives, casual superhero discourse, and random conversations about bad Hollywood decisions so regularly that Schumacher addressing it became its own recurring media event. He defended it in interviews throughout the late 90s and 2000s. Then, in 2017, he issued a full public apology for it, which is a remarkable thing to have to do about a rubber suit. People on Twitter still post the suit at least once a year with the same energy as when it first dropped. The Bat-nipples are referenced more than most actual scenes in the film. Costume designer Bob Ringwood confirmed in interviews that the suit was designed with direct reference to Greek and Roman warrior statues. The intent was to make Batman's armor look like a living marble sculpture, an idealized human form translated into latex. Schumacher endorsed the concept completely and considered it an artistic choice. What nobody on that production accounted for was how the anatomical detailing would read under studio lighting at full size, on a theater screen, and while in motion. Ringwood later acknowledged the public reaction was something they never anticipated, and described it as a hard design lesson about the gap between intention and perception. Personally, I think the real failure was not the concept. It was that nobody in the entire production chain stopped to ask what it would actually look like on camera. Subscribe if Hollywood's worst props deserve their own award show. Stick around to the end of the video because number 7 on our list is a masterclass in insanity. Number 5, Mr. Freeze Insane Puns. The nipples were at least a costume decision. 1997 Batman and Robin produced something even far worse in the actual script, when the studio handed Arnold Schwarzenegger $25 million to play Mr. Freeze, and the big guy used every cent of that energy to choose the worst version of every single line he was given. In the scene, Mr. Freeze delivered over 20 ice puns across the runtime, Fans literally cataloged and counted every single one online. The list includes Ice to Meet You, Chill Out, Cool Party, Allow Me to Break the Ice, and about 16 others in one film. George Clooney, who plays Batman, later told GQ that whenever he calls the film terrible, he starts by admitting he was terrible in it first. That is a shockingly honest thing for an A-list actor to say about his own blockbuster. And here's what makes it even wilder. The studio marketed Batman and Robin almost entirely on Schwarzenegger's star power. This was still peak Schwarzenegger era, one of the biggest names in Hollywood, and Warner Brothers treated his casting like the main event. The selling point, the guarantee. What most people don't realize is that director Joel Schumacher gave Schwarzenegger near total freedom with the dialogue. But instead of pulling the puns back or asking for restraint, he encouraged Schwarzenegger to lean into them fully as a performance choice. The script reportedly included multiple pun variations for the same moment, different options, and varying levels of intensity, but Schwarzenegger chose the most extreme version every single time. The result is a film containing over 20 documented ice puns, all carefully counted by fans over the years. 20 puns, one movie, and the director believed each one was landing. Batman and Robin didn't just disappoint people, it froze the franchise for 8 years. When Christopher Nolan brought it back with Batman Begins, the tone shift felt seismic, serious, grounded, and realistic. It was treated like a resurrection. So how does that same film, praised for restoring dignity to the character, contain a fight scene so poorly executed that the stunt coordinator still referenced it as a textbook example of exactly how not to shoot action? Number 6. The Warehouse Fight. Batman Begins is consistently ranked among the greatest superhero films ever made. Filmmaker Christopher Nolan's direction is precise, controlled, and almost surgical in how carefully it builds tone and tension, but the warehouse fight in the third act, along with several other action sequences, was shot with such aggressive handheld camera work and edited with cuts so fast that individual moments are genuinely impossible to follow. Reddit threads on film subreddits have discussed this specific sequence for years. YouTube video essays on action cinematography, many with millions of views, use Batman Begins as their primary case study when explaining how Hollywood lost the ability to film a coherent fight scene during that decade. The consensus from professional action directors is consistent across interviews. The choreography underneath those cuts is actually solid. Christian Bale trained well, but you just can't see any of it on screen. Director Nolan made the choice deliberately. He felt the choreography looked too staged when he held on a wide, steady shot. He wanted Batman's fighting to feel chaotic and overwhelming, like you are inside it rather than watching from a distance. Editor Lee Smith confirmed in interviews that the sequences were cut specifically to prevent the audience from tracking individual movements. The disorientation was the intended effect. The problem, as action filmmakers explained in interviews and video essays, is that disorientation also kills geography, stakes, and momentum in a fight scene. It works for panic. It does not work when the audience needs to know who is winning and why it matters. Nolan understood this himself by The Dark Knight. That film was shot almost entirely different, with wider angles and much longer takes during the action, and he course-corrected quietly. The problem is that the industry had already copied the Batman Begins approach wholesale before Nolan fixed it himself. The shaky cam, fast-cut style spread across blockbuster filmmaking for a decade, used by directors who lacked Nolan's artistic justification and simply wanted to hide bad choreography behind chaos. One misjudged scene in a great film reshaped how action movies looked for years. Nolan finally fixed the action in The Dark Knight and made one of the most acclaimed films of the decade. But at the peak of this countdown, let's talk about a scene that had been the single most debated, most publicly defended, most aggressively mocked scene in Batman movie history, and Zack Snyder is still giving interviews about it. Number 7. The Mom Disaster. In Batman vs. Superman from 2016, the entire film built to one moment. 2 hours of escalating hatred. A Batman so consumed by the idea of destroying Superman that he had forged a spear specifically for the job, built an armored suit, and trained his body for a fight he intended to finish permanently. The confrontation finally comes. Batman wins. Superman is down on the ground, weakened by kryptonite, his body failing. Batman stands over him and raises the spear, and Superman, barely able to breathe, lungs shutting down, uses what might be his final words to say two things: "Save Martha." Batman stops. Something shifts behind his eyes. He steps back from the spear and demands to know why Superman said that name. Superman can barely speak now. He manages to get it out. Martha is his mother. She has been taken and she will die if Batman does not go. Batman looks at the spear in his hand. He sets it down. The greatest fight in superhero movie history ends not with a kill, not with a surrender, not with a moment of heroism, but because two men's mothers happen to share a first name. The reaction when the film opened in March 2016 was immediate and total. Within hours of the first screenings, social media was already turning the scene into memes, a popular comedy film meme in which two characters become instant best friends the moment they discover something they have in common, was repurposed as a Batman and Superman image within the same day. "Why did you say that name?" entered the cultural vocabulary almost immediately and stayed there. Online forums spent years debating the scene's internal logic. The film's own production team went on record saying the audience reaction genuinely confused them. Zack Snyder, the director, has addressed this scene in commentaries, interviews, live streams, and magazine features across 8 years, but nothing has moved public opinion. And here is the detail almost nobody knows. During development, the team actually considered pushing the plot further. They discussed making the two Marthas literally the same person. Bruce Wayne's mother did not die in that alley. She was placed into witness protection, and she eventually ended up in Kansas as Martha Kent. Snyder has confirmed this was genuinely on the table, but they chose the name coincidence because it felt like the more grounded option. The concept was never the problem, the execution was. The film spent 2 hours making Batman so completely beyond reason, so certain, so violent, so far past the point where words could reach him, that no single name was going to plausibly stop him in 5 seconds of screen time. The Martha scene does not just ask you to accept a storytelling shortcut, it asks you to accept that a man who spent an entire film engineering a weapon to commit murder put that weapon down because he heard his mother's name. Personally, I think Snyder believed audiences would trust him enough to make that leap. They didn't. And he is still, 8 years later, making the case. If you want to see what happens when actors go completely off script, and it somehow works, go watch our video on the 7 levels of improvised movie scenes. It is right there on the channel, and it is absolutely worth your time. Subscribe if you haven't already.